Today on Muscle Car, we're back with another Build by Request special. You emailed us and asked us how to do it, so we'll show you. Learn how to get stuck bolts out, see how a radiator shop works, fix a busted cast on Bellhousing, and then see some of the world's most famous cars under one roof.
Hey guys, welcome back. Well, I've got to do a repair that a few of you have probably hit on, or you're praying that you never will. What we've got is aluminum timing cover off of a 350 Buick, and we were removing the water pump because it was leaking, and well, a couple of the bolts are twisted off, and we've got a stripped hole. This is a pretty common problem whenever you're combining two metals, steel bolts, in aluminum housing, especially whenever you consider it as close as it is to the cooling passage. All that water and antifreeze sometimes can cause that corrosion. So we're going to show you several ways to remove the bolts and repair the threads just in case you ever have to try this. The first technique we're going to use is the most common. The spray-on chemical like WD-40 Specialist Rust Release Penetrant Spray. Now I've let this set for a while, and a lot of times the longer you can let it set, the better off you are. Kind of gives it time to work. To remove this broken stud, I'm going to use a standard old set of locking pliers. One thing to keep in mind, make sure that the teeth on them are nice and sharp. Otherwise, if they're all dull, they'll just slip around that stud. You need to wiggle it back and forth real easy, because a little bit of movement back and forth kind of go a long ways. If you just try to go all one big motion, you'll probably just twist it right back off, flush with the top of that aluminum housing. There you go. Now that way worked really easy. I've got another way I want to show you, using this stuff. That's paraffin wax, and you may have some of this sitting in your cupboard. They use this stuff a lot of times for the canning process, and apparently it works really well on removing bolts. You want to heat up the metal and concentrate on the area around the bolt, not so much the bolt itself, getting it just hot enough that the wax will melt. Whoop, didn't work. Now the wax may have worked for other people, but to me, the WD-40 Rust Release Spray works a lot better. The way we're going to get this stud out is we're going to drill the center of it out with a left-handed drill bit. But if that doesn't work that way, we're going to follow it up with an extractor that we got from Matco. This thing's got a lot more bite to it than that drill bit, so it should thread into the hole, wedge itself, and then screw it back out. A quick massage with a grinder will level the working surface down. I'll mark center, then start running the drill bits in. Gradually, you want to increase the size of these left-handed drill bits with the hope that one of them will extract the bolt for you. If not, give an extractor a try. You can also employ some tricks like using WD-40 and some heat on the area. Unfortunately, this bolt was so stubborn, we're running a risk of breaking an extractor. You definitely don't want to twist one of these things off because it's a piece of hardened steel, and if you do, a lot of times it requires a trip to the machine shop. I'll waller the last of the bolt out and knock the old threads out of the way real quick like. The last of those bolt threads look like some kind of critter or something. Now since our hole is enlarged and we want to reuse that stock bolt, we're going to use one of these things. This is a thread repair insert. Matco offers a kit from small and large diameter and fine and coarse thread. You want to make sure to use a tap that comes with the insert because it's the proper size. Then you just screw in the thread repair device and lickety-split. It's pretty much that easy. Okay, the next step is I've got to use a roll punch and drop off in the hole to break this tang off like on this one, because that's what keeps it from backing out. Okay, those couple ways that I showed you is what I would refer to as a mechanical repair. Now I've got a chemical repair to use. This product's made by Loctite and they call it Forma-Thread. It's a two-part component, what you use for a filler, and then they've got a thread release agent that you brush onto the bolt. Now you want to make sure that you get this on all the threads, because if you leave a spot exposed, that filler can attack and it'll bond to it, so just make sure you got it all done. And then with that done, you just want to mix your two components 1-to-1. After the repair compound is in the hole, you screw in a bolt with the correct thread you're trying to copy, and you give it a good 10 to 15 minutes to set up. Carefully screw the bolt back out. Well, there you go. We showed you several different ways to do the same type of repair. And let's hope that you really don't have to ever do this, because it's not any kind of fun at all.
Still ahead, we reveal some of the mystery behind radiator repair and show you how a busted bell housing on a Turbo 400 tranny doesn't make it a paperweight.
Hey guys, we've had a few emails asking about how to revive an old school radiator instead of just throwing it in the garbage or having to buy a new one. So we decided to take a trip to a radiator shop to let you guys in on the story. We're at Columbia Radiator at a good friend of mine's place in Columbia, Tennessee. You guys meet Junior. Junior, what are some of the reasons why people bring radiators into you?
Well, Tom, most of them they come in, they're either leaking, they're either stopped up, or they're just old and wore out.
What we're going to do is follow these guys back out into the shop to check out what actually goes on. Now generally, this isn't the kind of repair you'll do in your pappy's garage. Radiator repair is one of those things that require special tools. But taking it to a pro like old Junior here can save you some big bucks in the long run.
Tom, what we got here is a old radiator we've already tested, and it's a little too far gone to be helped. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to take it apart and record it.
Most old radiator tanks are soldered onto the core with lead solder. So that's another reason to let the pros do it with proper safety equipment.
All right, Tom, you can see inside the calcium and the hard water deposits that built up inside the radiator. This particular radiator shows a lot of signs of solder bloom, which is basically the solder from the inside of the radiators rolled out to the inside of the tank. This one's too far gone, but if we were going to try to fix it, we'd have to do a process what they call rodding. We're going to take our rod, which is just basically a piece of flat stock, start on one end, push it down through the tube. And what you're doing is you're pushing the crud out to one end. So when you go all the way to the end, kind of work it back and forth, you keep going to the next one.
Do you ever run into an issue of like actually poking through?
A lot of times when they're just too far gone to be helped, they're just rotten. Over time, the water passes through it and it rots away at the brass or the copper. So if you go inside of it and start pushing the crud out, a lot of times the crud's attached itself to the inside of the tube. And once you move it out of the way, you'll tear a hole inside the tube of the radiator. Now Tom, this is a new core that we've ordered in to replace the other one. Basically what we got here, like I said, 4 rows, staggered tubes, they're 1/2 inch on 9/16 centers. Basically it gives you the same amount of coolant capacity, a little more air, a little more efficient.
It takes a good amount of solder to reattach the tanks on one of these because it has to be completely watertight. Some acid flux is also required to make sure you get a secure bond. Once the tanks are attached to the radiator, it has to be tested. This aluminum dirt track radiator apparently had got too comfortable with the fan, and unfortunately the only way to fix an aluminum unit with this problem is with epoxy. The radiator is pressurized with air, then dipped into a water tank with green dye in it to make the air bubbles from the leaks more visible.
Almost ready for reinstallation.
And that thing looks pretty good, and it's really not that much work considering I didn't have to do any of it. Now you guys, if you have any other radiator issues, kind of like a cracked neck or the filler neck that's bent, you might give this guy a call, he can fix you up. Thanks again, man.
Man, I appreciate it.
Now that was cool if we were like 6.
Stick around and see how a cast-on bell housing can be replaced and made stronger all at the same time. Then head to Movie Land and choose your favorite ride.
Hey guys, I got a little trick up my sleeve today that I'm wanting to show you that a few of you may be able to relate to, and that is repairing a transmission case that's been broken. Now normally people would look at this type of thing and call it a piece of scrap metal, but this thing is savable. And this same procedure will relate to that guy that's trying to crossbreed some stuff. Let's say you've got a big block Mopar and you want to put a Power Glide behind it. The way I plan to get there is by one of these, an Ultra Bell that I got from Summit Racing. Now this thing just simply bolts to the front of the transmission here on the front pump, but you do have to cut off the old bell housing. Now to a few of you out there, that process may sound kind of scary, but in our situation right now with this thing, first thing we can do is fix it.
Well, that'll do. That should be good enough for Tommy to cut.
Now I've put a couple of these things on, and what I like to use is a little bitty 1/8" drill bit and then come in from the inside of the bell housing and drill a couple of holes through to the outside. What that does is that kind of gives me a connected dot kind of outline here on the outside of the case. That way I don't mess up the part I'm trying to save. Now you just got to connect your holes. Well, we're ready to start doing some cutting, and to do that, I'm going to use a 4.5" cutting disc on a grinder. Now you could use a reciprocating saw or an air saw, something like that, but it just seems to take a lot more time to do it that way. We're ready to try our first time at trial fitting this thing, but before I can do that, I've got to zip out the front pump bolts. That's no biggie. With impact, it'll be out of the way in no time. Let's see how far off I am. What you want to see is this part of the bell housing touching the front pump edge. What you don't want to see is this part of the transmission case touching the bell housing like it is here. So what we're going to do is get out our carbide bits to remove some of this metal. Now you can tell that the teeth on this one are considerably closer together than this one, which is designed to be used whenever you're shaping on aluminum. You can use this one on the aluminum, but the problem is this thing kind of galls up and it kind of cakes up. See, let me show you. Now you can see we didn't do a whole lot of grinding here and it's already started to build up. Let's see where we're at now. Yep, looks good. Now before you start throwing bolts at this thing, make sure that you put in these little bitty O-rings, because if you don't, this thing will leak like a sieve, and they just simply go right there. Now all we got to do is torque these front pump bolts down to spec and we're in business. What do you guys think? I think we did all right. Now for a few of you drag racers out there, this little bell housing is SFI approved, and as the website says, this thing's supposed to be 600 times stronger than that thing. So, you might try you one on.
Still ahead, we ask Bo Duke himself why these old car TV shows are still so cool.
Hey guys, Muscle Cars on the road again. We got an invitation to come up to Louisville, Kentucky for Carl Casper's 50th International Custom Auto Show, and we had to take advantage of it. So what do you say? Let's go take a look. I cannot wait. What you're looking at is 750,000 square feet of custom cars, muscle cars, movie cars, and practically everything else automotive under the sun. There's guaranteed to be something here that's right up your alley. That is a serious restoration. One of the big attractions every year at Carl Casper's Custom Car Show is the Pinstripers Bash that's for charities. Every dime that these guys raise goes to the children's charities that they've picked.
That's 79 here now, 5.
With all the proceeds coming from the items that were sold in the auction.
Sold it, $70.
If you guys have been watching Muscle Car for a while, you've known that I've made mention to the fact that I was lucky enough to be involved in a few television projects over the years and movie projects, and it just so happens that the guy who was my boss during all that is Carl Casper. If you take a look around, he's got quite a selection of some of the great projects he's been involved with through the years that are just outstanding in the show. Here's another iconic car you guys may recognize that Carl had business with, and if you take a look over here, remember this one? Carl was also involved in this project. And also, take a look behind me at that great big cube. Remember that thing? Yep, something else that Carl had his hands in back in the day. Why are cars that were in television and movies from 20 to 30 years ago still getting so much attention and this many family photos? Well, one of the best people to ask just might be John Schneider. You might know him as Bo Duke from the Dukes of Hazzard.
Hey, how you doing? When I see a little kid come up here, like a 5-year-old, 6-year-old boy or girl that loves the Dukes of Hazzard, it means the world to me.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
There's like a lot of stuff on TV nowadays that like families can't watch together, but the Dukes of Hazzard, you can kind of just sit down and it'd be like a family thing and you watch it.
You couldn't draw flies with Barney Miller. You couldn't draw flies with Hill Street Blues. These are TV shows that were huge hits in the 70s and 80s that I don't think anybody has any awareness at all of anymore. You could get a crowd for Vanishing Point You could get a crowd for Smoking the Bandit, Gone in 60 Seconds, the real one.
Yeah,
Sorry,
there you
Nicholas,
go.
not yours.
Since we're on Mopars, how about an AAR CUDA?
I bought this car in 1970 when I left Vietnam. The girl that was with me, I later married after I got the car.
Oh, nice.
Okay, we split up 2 years later. She took the car from me in a divorce. She called me one day and said, Mike, I'm ready to sell the CUDA. My wife that I've been married to for 20 years now,
Yeah.
she bought it from her for me.
That's not such a bad thing. That's not such a bad thing. We also came across a hard-to-find 67 Torino Fastback.
I actually brought this one home, you know, found the car in the woods, been sitting for 27 years with trees growing up through it.
When Gary Brewer pulled this Ford out of the weeds 3 years ago, he originally wouldn't have guessed anyone would be stopping and admiring it at a car show. And truth be told, he didn't want to rebuild it, but his then 15-year-old son did.
750 Holly on it. It's actually Summit brand. Got weld racing rims all the way around it. It sounds pretty mean.
He said, I think that's the one I want to do. I said, can't we start with one a little better shape? He's seen it in this car, and you know, he had the vision. You know, he had the vision of what he wanted to do.
As we went along, you know, started doing a little bit here, a little bit there, and that's how it went over the 2.5 years.
So there you have it. If you want it bad enough to build it yourself, sooner or later it'll pay off and everyone can see your hard work. If you've got any questions about anything you saw on the show today,
Go over to PowerBlockTV.com.